All right, hello everyone. Here at the George R. Brown Convention Center, last day of the Republican Party of Texas biennial convention. Sitting here with State Senator-elect Kevin Sparks. The elect is just kind of a formality at this point because you don't have a Democratic opponent. You don't even have a Libertarian opponent. So you're going to have to, everyone in SD 31 has to not vote, including you, for you not to be elected. So you're in. I mean, it's you can't get out now.
I'm feeling very comfortable about my mom. I believe she'll vote for me, so I'll have at least one.
Got at least one. Well, congratulations first on the win there.
Thank you.
Looking forward to you being in the Texas Senate. One of the reasons I know that I and others are looking forward to you being in the Texas Senate is that unlike a number of folks, you come in as an expert practitioner in the oil and gas industry. Certainly, according to Joe Biden, you hate children, you want to destroy the planet, you kick
Right.
puppy dogs, all those kind of things. But the oil and gas industry in Texas, I read recently, provides about $1 billion a month in tax revenue into the Lone Star State. So I want to first ask you kind of a macro question, put you on the spot as a state senator. When you think of $1 billion a month coming into the state coffers from the oil and gas industry, how would you like to see that $1 billion spent? What should we be doing with that money?
Well, the easy answer is I'd like to see it spent wisely, right?
Well, no, that may be asking too much.
Yes. Well, no, I believe we can do that. But one of the things that we have to continually remind ourselves is that in order to create that revenue, we've got to have the infrastructure in roads and bridges and all of that, because it takes a lot of traffic to generate that oil and gas. We have to be willing to help facilitate pipelines and all of the infrastructure that it takes to get our product to market. So some of those dollars needs to go back to West Texas so that we have roads that are safe to travel and we have the capacity to move those products around and get them to market.
So I think it's one of the things that we lose sight of when we talk about the oil and gas industry is that it's not like there is some magic straw that goes into the ground on one end and the other end comes out at the gas tank pump. I mean, there's a whole lot of infrastructure. You talk about downstream, how the oil moves, and it actually has to move over the same roadways that passenger cars do. And I think the wear and tear on the highways that comes from that, eventually not only does it become problematic for just people driving around, but it can become downright dangerous when you're driving these heavy trucks. So to make sure that we have that kind of infrastructure in place to ensure that the industry literally doesn't get stopped on the side of the road.
That's exactly right. And we've seen that in a lot of instances really over the last 15 years.
Right.
So we have a similar situation up in the Panhandle with cattle and the grain industry, in that they provide significant revenue from the north part of my district as
Right.
well. All of those industries require a lot of freight that moves around, and in a lot of instances their road infrastructure is not sufficient to maintain good, safe traffic.
So I want to keep our focus on the oil and gas industry, but I do want to note that it is fascinating to me looking at particularly at your Central Oil District, which is larger than a good number of states. All right,
Only 45 counties.
there are only 45 counties, larger than many of the states, and you think of the two industries that have historically defined Texas. And here in the 21st century, we think of the, kind of Austin tech scene. You think of the, the business centers, the Metroplex, or even Houston. But West Texas is where you have kind of the two, and continue to be the two drivers of the state's economy: the oil and gas industry, and then ranching. How do you see yourself as a senator trying to marry those two kind of the historic, major, critically important components to the state's economy, with then the needs of the other part of the state, of the rest of the economy, as it were.
Well, I would say that, both energy and food are two extremely critical components, not only for Texas, but for our nation.
Right.
And so it's just critical that we provide the necessary infrastructure to support both of those components.
Yeah. Okay, I want to go back to oil and gas for a second. So, as we look at the challenges that are out there, as a state senator, you can't do anything about foreign wars. You can't do anything about what the Saudis do or don't do as a result of foreign wars, those kind of things. But in Texas, surely there are things that we can do, that Texas can do, to unleash the power of the energy sector, to unleash the oil and gas industry. What are some of those things?
Well, one of the things that I think we need to be mindful of, we've got to continue to push back against the federal government.
Right.
We saw during the Obama administration it's a huge onslaught of regulation against producing hydrocarbons. Mm-hmm. And during the Trump era, they were able to peel most of that back. Well, starting day one with the Biden administration, they reversed course on all of that, and they've been very vocal about that. We saw what's John Kerry? He's a czar. He's our
climate change
czar, because
right.
we need one of those.
Need one of those, absolutely.
And he was,
no problem can't be made worse without a czar.
He was very clear that President Biden is completely against all forms of hydrocarbon,
right,
and that they should go away, and that this $5-6 gasoline should not reverse course on where they're headed. That we've got to stay the course, because they're completely against any type of hydrocarbon fuel.
Well, and I think that we have seen that, certainly we have watched the various, kind of direct attacks by the Democratic administrations on the kind of the hydrocarbon energy, on the energy industry. But now we've seen something new in the last few months of them beginning to treat the oil and gas industry as if y'all were, drug peddlers and other things, by trying to restrict your access in banking, restrict access in the credit markets. Again, how can Texas push back against that?
Well, I think so. This is not necessarily a new concept. This whole environmental, social, and governance, this
right,
ESG, that the public is just now becoming aware of, actually started 4 or 5 years ago, and it's really kind of an international thing with the major financial institutions, where they are trying to manipulate the market by inflicting their values and saying, if you do business with companies that produce hydrocarbon, we're not loaning you any money. And so it has decreased capital to energy producers significantly. I think the last number that I was told probably has reduced it by close to 75% over the last 3 years.
Wow.
So it's significant. Biden is, on one hand, lambasting our industry because we're not producing more of it, but he's supporting all of the policies that would keep us from producing more of it.
Yeah. Okay. So, thinking legislatively, when you raise your hand, you do the oath, you're now a state senator. What are the legislative initiatives that you want to pursue? Certainly in regards to oil and gas regulation, but maybe more broadly.
Well, so a couple of things that we need to do. We talked about over regulating.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when we had Winter Storm Uri last year, one of the things that came out of that, and I think it's misbased, is that the natural gas industry failed, and we had gas wells freeze up. And so the Railroad Commission right now is actually, they've put out some new regulations for all of our industry to winterize their equipment. Well, in my opinion, most of that is just going to be money that's wasted.
Right.
That ultimately comes down, and it flows to the consumer, because that was not really wasn't the most significant problem during that time, right? The ERCOT shut down power to a lot of our oil and gas fields, and anytime you shut it down without movement, things are going to freeze up.
Right.
So I think we've got to keep from enacting things that don't make sense, and we got to focus on the things that really will improve our our grid system. One of the things that I'm very passionate about is trying to make sure that in Texas we don't follow California's playbook in managing our grid, which we're headed that direction right now. We continue to put more dollars into wind and solar, which the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine. And so that's intermittent power.
Right.
And yet we are not building any gas-fired, any coal-fired. We're decommissioning coal-fired plants.
Right.
And we still won't take a look at any kind of nuclear baseload. And we're, with more than 1,500 people a day moving to Texas, we're getting behind the 8 ball on our grid system.
So there's last legislative session, so you can't be blamed for that. But last legislative session, Chapter 313 expired, and that was the tax abatement program, kind of corporate welfare program that really was used to benefit the intermittent, unreliable energy sources. There's been some talk of trying to bring that back. Certainly the wind folks and the solar folks really want that to come back. You've had a number of the investors in that arena say the only reason they invest in there is because of the favorable tax treatment. Right. What is your sense about 313 being revived, resurrected?
Yeah, in my opinion, it does not make sense to continue to subsidize those industries. If they're at a point where they can stand on their own and compete on a level playing field, then people and companies would be willing to invest, and that's the way the free market works. Right. But I do not believe that we should be further subsidizing any industry to come into Texas. One of the things that I think we made a practice quite a few years ago where we're giving tax incentives to all kinds of businesses to come to Texas. Well, in my mind, at this point, we don't need to be giving tax incentives because we already have infrastructure problems all across the state.
Right.
And if businesses see the benefit of coming to a state who has low taxes, very business-friendly environment, they should make that economic decision based off of that, and we shouldn't be taking those dollars out of our tax stream.
Outstanding. Okay, so now that you have an election under your belt, now that you have you're looking ahead to being able to take office, what lessons have you already taken away that you could share with someone who might right now be thinking about maybe running for the Texas Senate in a couple of years? What kind of advice would you give them right now?
Run. No. Actually, so honestly, this time last year, my wife Jill and I had not contemplated running for any public office. Although
a lot of folks would have maybe preferred Jill.
Well, yes.
I'm just kidding. I'm done.
Actually, as we campaigned across our 45 counties, everybody loved Jill, and they tend to tolerate me. But no, I would say, as we kind of prayed through that, it became evident that if good people are not willing to step out there and take a chance and step into these positions, then our system's ultimately going to fail.
Right.
And so I would highly recommend people give it the thought. If they're in a position in life, we were newly empty nesters and kind of wondering what our next phase in life was going to look like. Hadn't really contemplated that it would look like this. But now that we're in it, I believe this is really what God's called us to do, at least for the foreseeable future.
Outstanding. Well, Kevin Sparks, thanks for your time today. Hope you have a great last day of the convention. Appreciate you and Jill and your family's willingness to serve the state of Texas. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, everyone.